Hello. So, science part 2. Hopefully, if you're watching this, you have already done Leader and Me. You've already done your math lesson. There wasn't a lot in terms of the problems you had for that, but you watched the video, hopefully, did the area model with me. The third thing you were supposed to do today was your science part 1, double bubble note taker. That was probably the longest part of your day. If you're watching this and have not done your double bubble note taker yet, then stop. Go do that. Then this is pretty much the last thing besides your math homework, okay? Good job. You are here. You followed directions. Way to go. Okay. Oh, don't forget, hopefully when you did the Leader and Me thing, you did a flip grade. If you didn't, then stop, go do that and come back. All right, so this is pretty quick, actually. Like I said, the double bubble note taker was the harder of the 2 science things we had to do today. This is just going over some differences between biomes, ecosystems, and habitats, okay? So we've seen these words before. We've seen ecosystems a bunch of times. Biomes I have mentioned, but not a lot. I haven't mentioned habitats a lot, but I'm sure you've heard these words in your life before at some point, okay? And really today we want to talk about the differences between them. You are going to have to answer a few questions on a Microsoft Forms page, so pay attention. And you can watch this as many times as you need. When you answer this on Microsoft Forms, the questions, you're going to want to use your own words. So yes, these are going to have definitions, but you need to take those definitions and put them in your words, please, where you're not copying and pasting from Mrs. Croteau or Google. Okay. So, biomes, ecosystems, and habitats, what is the difference? Well, your goal is to understand those differences and then be able to explain the meaning of those 3 terms in your words, your own words, okay? Which is what that forms page will be. What is an ecosystem? That's our first question. Well, we've already talked about the fact that there are aquatic ecosystems and there are terrestrial ecosystems. And we have talked about what they are. Hopefully you remember. An ecosystem, here's an example of one. You've seen this picture before. An ecosystem, in my words, how I would put it before I even get to the actual definition, the way I would describe an ecosystem is sort of a group of living and non-living things that all interact with each other and they impact each other. Okay, so it can be a really small ecosystem, you know, like a pond, or maybe even a puddle, okay? The water is important there, the bugs that maybe are landing on the water or getting things from the water, any little critters that live inside of the water, right? Maybe that water is helping weeds grow in the cracks of the street, if that puddle's on the street, right? Now, I'm not saying every puddle has critters in it, but like hypothetically, right? So it can be a big ecosystem. It can be huge, like an ocean. It can be small, like a pond. Those are 2 aquatic examples. But it's a system where living things, you know, such as plants, animals, and the non-living things like the sun, some rocks, maybe logs, the weather, they all work together and help each other out, okay? It's a community, basically. So here's the specific example from the text. It says, whoa, that was not what I wanted to do. It says, a group of plants and animals interacting with each other and the environment. It actually should include non-living things here too, because it's living and non-living. So a group of plants and animals, as well as, I'm going to add to that, as well as non-living things. The thing is, non-living things don't really interact with their environment, but the living things do, right? So say there's a log. That log at one point was obviously part of a tree. You might be thinking, well, why is that log important? Well, the log might be important, and that's a non-living thing, right? See, like this rotting log here? Make it a little bigger. Because perhaps that rotting log is a place for maybe little bunnies or something to take shelter. I don't know. I'm just coming up with a random thing. Or little rats or little bugs. Okay? Maybe termites are feeding on it, right? So it serves its purpose in this community. So do all these other things. The kangaroo serves its purpose by eating some of the other animals that are in the community. The water serves the purpose because it's giving life to plants. It's giving a home to some of the bacteria and the fish, right? So they all help each other out. And like I said, it can be a very large system, it can be a very small system. But the point is, it's like a web. All the things work together in that system. And there's the aquatic ones and the terrestrial ones. Okay. Remember, when you do the Microsoft form, you are not copying these exact words. Think about the things I just said. Think about what I described. Think about how you can put it in your words. I'm not grading your literacy here. I'm grading your understanding of the idea. Okay. Ooh, so we have been hearing and saying the word ecosystem, biome, and habitat before, and sometimes it feels like they all mean the same thing. They actually don't. They are not the same. They are three separate things: biome, ecosystem, and habitat. They are not the same. They are not synonyms, okay? They're similar, yeah, but they're not the same. So we already talked about ecosystem. What's a biome? Biome is actually probably what you're more familiar with. It's basically a large area of Earth with a certain climate, certain plants and animals. So they can kind of categorize it by the types of plants, animals that live there. It does sound very similar to ecosystem, but not exactly the same. So here's how you can kind of remember it. There are 5 main types of biomes, okay? And so you've got the aquatic biome. There's also aquatic ecosystems, I know. You've got desert biomes. So they think about the climate, they think about the plants, the animals, and that's how they can categorize these large areas of land. The biggest difference is a biome's significantly larger, and the climate is important. Climate mostly meaning weather patterns, okay, in this case. Temperature, stuff like that. Tundra tends to be icy environments. Grassland and forest. Okay, these are the big ones. There are actually subcategories of some of these, but these are kind of the big overarching categories. Hint, hint, on your Microsoft forms, I'm going to be asking you to give me an example of a biome. So you can pick one of these or more. But please try to just close this out and remember. Okay, see if you can remember with your own mind instead of having this open. Okay, so in Washington, much of our land tends to be forest biomes. Now, that's not everything. There's actually some deserts as well. And of course, obviously aquatic. There's a lot of aquatic stuff in Washington. And it varies place to place. And, each state might have multiple different types of biomes within it. So you might be thinking, okay, well, that sounds still a lot like the other thing. How's it different? Okay, watch. Biomes have ecosystems inside of them. So I want you to think of a biome as being the larger thing. And then inside of the biome are individual ecosystems. Okay, it's kind of like a state. The biome is the state, and the ecosystems are the cities or the counties. Okay, so if you're thinking bigger picture, you're thinking biome, larger pieces of land. Inside of those biomes that we're looking at that have similar plants, similar animals, similar weather, inside of those are individual ecosystems. Because think about it. Think about if you go to the Hoh rainforest. Okay, it is a forest biome, right? But even inside of that rainforest, there might be other smaller ecosystems inside of that one ecosystem. I mean, you can think of the rainforest as a whole as one ecosystem, but you could also think about maybe there's a little river or pond in there, and that's another ecosystem in and of itself, right? Think about this. The Amazon rainforest, that's one ecosystem, but there are probably also multiple ecosystems within that ecosystem because it's not as much based upon like the size. Okay, it's more about the system itself. But everything within this rainforest does work together. And Kootenai, I think I said that right, National Forest Ecosystem, Montana. Each of these are examples of a forest biome. A biome, though, there are many, many different biomes that are considered forest biomes. There are many, 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 many. The Hoh rainforest is one specific ecosystem that is different from this ecosystem, even though they are both forest biomes. Tricky, I know. I know. Okay, so it's basically a biome has many ecosystems inside of it. An ecosystem has multiple plants, animals, and species interacting with each other. Okay, so there might be many different kinds of ecosystems in a biome, many examples. A habitat is the other vocabulary word. So we've talked about ecosystem, we've talked about biome. Habitat is where a plant or animal makes its home. Okay, so it's actually the smallest thing on the list. Biome, big, 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 large areas of land, many, many miles. Ecosystem, a little bit smaller. Habitat, even smaller. Maybe it's just one small cave where that animal lives, or one small, couple, I don't know, few yards. Maybe that animal only goes within that little area. Okay, so biome, big. Ecosystem, a little smaller. Habitat, even smaller. Think about it like the animal's house, the animal's neighborhood. Okay, so let's talk about the Gulf of Mexico. The Gulf of Mexico is considered part of an aquatic biome. It is one example of an aquatic biome. Okay, so when we think about this, we think the Gulf of Mexico, it has shallow waters. And in the Gulf of Mexico, there are lots of different plants and animals. So even though it is technically an aquatic biome, it is also an example of an ecosystem. Here are some organisms that interact inside of the Gulf of Mexico ecosystem. Seagrass, dolphins, turtles, sea bass, snapper fish, lobster, and oysters. So I'm going to show you on a whiteboard. I don't like not having a whiteboard. It's too difficult. I want you to think about the biome as the big category. Okay, so every ecosystem is going to be inside of some kind of a biome. Maybe it's a desert biome, could be tundra, grasslands, aquatic, but every single ecosystem is inside of a biome of some kind. So the biome is the big category. And then, like I said, within inside of that biome, there's all these different ecosystems. So yeah, the Gulf of Mexico is an aquatic type of biome, but the Gulf of Mexico is just one example of an aquatic biome. There are also a million other different aquatic biomes, right? It's not the only aquatic biome that exists. There are many. So inside of the biome is an ecosystem, and there's many different kinds. And then within that ecosystem is the individual habitats, okay? All right. And I could get really specific and I could say, oh, I'm going to think about like desert biomes in particular. And then I could list examples of lots of different deserts that I can think of, right? I could think of any kind of desert. one specific one, and I could list each of those deserts out. And those can be their own individual ecosystems, okay? Because each desert isn't going to be exactly the same. They each have their own individual ecosystem. So like, for example, if I went to a desert in Eastern Washington, that desert's going to look very different than a desert in California, and that desert's going to look very different than a desert in the Middle East. And, so not every single desert is the same, but they all are considered a desert biome. All right, so here's an example of like oysters within each of these categories. So oysters are part of the aquatic biome because they live in the water. Oysters live in the shallow waters of the Gulf of Mexico, interacting with other plants and animals, so they are also part of a specific ecosystem here, which is the Gulf of Mexico ecosystem, which is an aquatic biome. And then habitat is their little specific home. So you're thinking, okay, well, I know they're in the water. I know that they live in the Gulf of Mexico, but like where in the Gulf of Mexico? So then you're narrowing in even smaller, and they make their home in seagrass. So that's when you're thinking the specific like thing they use as a house almost. It's the best way I can put it. Okay, so biome, huge. Ecosystem, slightly smaller. Habitat, even smaller. Okay, so it's a little bit of a tricky concept. I'm going to attach an additional video too that explains it perhaps better than I, because, well, I did just explain it. Sometimes, like I've said to you guys many times before, sometimes you got to hear another person talk about it. And Mrs. Croteau talks a lot sometimes. So sometimes it's nice to hear somebody who's a scientist say it in a more concise way. Okay? So I will also attach another video if you're like, the heck? Okay? If you're like, oh, I get it. All right, cool. Great. You can move on. But if you're still a little confused, you may want to watch the other video before you fill out your form. And if you get it, you can do your form. Okay? And I'd prefer you try to explain it like a big picture, not give an example when you do the ecosystem habitat part. But if you can't think of any other way, then that's okay too. Okay, and by the way, after you do your form, it's the last thing you have to do today besides your math homework. Woohoo! Really good. A lot of people get their stuff done and follow directions. Perhaps we can do more. I did have to take away one letter because it was a little scary today. So we're going to see how, and I don't usually believe in doing that. You know what? There are points where it's like, woof. So we're going to see how we do with following directions today. Hopefully wonderful. And then I'll see you all on Monday.